Hello and welcome to Chatty AF, the anime feminist podcast. I'm Dee, the managing editor at AniFem. I also run the anime blog, The Josei Next Door, and you can find me on Twitter at Josei Next Door. And today I am joined by fellow AniFem staffers, Vrai and Caitlin.
Hey, I'm Vrai. I'm an editor and contributor at Anime Feminist. I'm a freelancer on the internet, so if you go to my Twitter, at WriterVry, and look at my pinned thread, you can find all the places I freelance and do stuff. Or you can find the other podcast I'm on at Trashpod.
Hi, I'm Caitlin, a writer and editor for Anime Feminist, as well as having my own blog that I've been neglecting. I have a heroin problem, heroin with an E, and the anime expert for The Daily Dot.
And today we'll be continuing our newbie guide watch-along of Escaflowne, covering episodes 7 through 13, where, really nothing important happened. It was a pretty slow stretch, except that Asturia's king chased everyone out. Dilandau and Alan made a bunch of bad choices. Vaughn killed a snake. Alan got stabbed. Everyone went to Frayed. They met Prince Cheed. Prince Cheed met his baby daddy, but doesn't know it. A doppelganger joined the cast and then died. Zybok burned Frayed to the ground. The Duke of Frayed told his son to never, ever, ever let anyone ever unlock Atlantis' sealed power, and then immediately changed his mind and died. They gave the sealing sword to Zybok, and Vaughn may have fused with his robot. So, I think that was everything.
Escaflowne.
Did I miss anything important?
Everything happened
so much.
Exactly. Certainly not boring. Pretty easy to binge. Which also means we should have lots of stuff to talk about today, which is exciting. So I guess just to kind of kick us off, how did folks enjoy this very busy stretch of episodes?
It's good. It's very good. The character stuff was always very good. And, the plot, like I said, we said last week, the plot always falls right out of our heads after we watch it. So all of the big plot twists in general were not total surprises, but like, oh, right. Yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting to rewatch because all the plot fell out of my head except for like two major... This is a series that loves twists, and there's one major twist that I remembered that I know isn't till the very end of the show, and there's one that I keep expecting to come along any day now. Like, is it this? Is it? No, I guess it's in the next crop of episodes. All right. But I'm still having a good time. It has been interesting in that we mentioned at the end of the last episode that kind of right as we were prepping for the first episode of the watch-along, right as Funimation was taking its toys and going home from Crunchyroll. So I went from watching the HD subs, the HD remaster on Crunchyroll, to not wanting to deal with Funimation's whole thing and pulling up my old Genion DVDs, which is not an HD remaster, and let me tell you, the visible difference is palpable.
Yeah.
And yeah, also those DVDs are very old, because it's one of those where if, say, you have to pick up the run of new episodes in the middle of a disc, and you click on a middle episode, it only plays that episode. It will not just start and play the rest of the disc from there. No.
So you had yourself a great time
yeah.
with your DVDs. Is it just that is the art just a little bit like a little less polished looking? Just like the
just kind of fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy in places. There was some screen tearing on my TV until I turned it off and back on, and then it popped back into the smaller ratio. And also, it just looks more washed out, like when you watch a tape too many times and the image starts to degrade. The HD remaster looks a lot sharper.
I wonder how many people listening to this podcast are going to really recognize that that feeling of when the disc starts to degrade, or when the tape starts to degrade.
Excuse you, we're very old.
Yeah.
That's a good point. You just dated us. Well done, Vrai.
DVD hasn't been around that long. I was in high school. Maybe they won't remember it, but they might have experienced it.
Okay.
Very old.
Anyway, guys, we don't have to have a crisis about this. It's fine.
Yeah,
and Caitlin.
Yes.
Caitlin, you'd said you wanted to say something about, because you've been watching the dub. How's that going?
Because
I'm still watching the sub, because All-Star Cast, as I said last week, can't not watch it subbed.
Well, because the Funimation app is garbage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just hot garbage, and I can't seem to get it to play the subtitles.
You have to be subscribed to...
I am subscribed.
Oh, and it's still... That's fun.
Yeah, well, it gives me the option, and then I select the option, and then it puts it in raw Japanese with no subtitles. And I'm like, hey, Funimation, can I please have some subtitles? And they're like, what's that? You just want the Japanese? And I'm like, no, give me subtitles. And they're like, okay, you can understand Japanese, I guess. Perfectly fluently enough to watch the series without any subtitles. Here you go. I'm like, no! So I ended up having to switch to the dub. Which is fine. Like, it's a perfectly acceptable dub. Like, Caitlin Glass is good. Aaron Dismuke is good. Like, everyone in it is good. Just the Japanese cast was so amazing. And Folken's voice is Vic Mignogna. And I'm sorry, but
Excuse me?
No!
I assumed he'd be playing Alan because trashbag blonde. But
no,
ew.
He's Folken, and it just, he's speaking in a lower register than he usually does, but it's still, like, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, no, he can act when he feels like it. He was on the Tiger and Bunny dub, and I didn't even immediately recognize his very irritating, omnipresent voice.
He was good in the Princess Tutu dub, too. Yeah, but
we're getting a little off track, guys.
He's no Joji Nakata,
No.
is what I'm getting at. So yeah.
No, that's fair. I'm fortunate enough the Funimation app is working for me. It's finicky, but I am able to pipe it through my phone via Chromecast. So,
Nice.
Chromecast is another thing that hates subtitles for me.
Oh no.
I'm cursed.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess. But it's kind of fun that we're all having slightly different experiences with him. Because Caitlin, Vrai, you're also watching a different translation. Because Funimation
really?
Retranslated.
Interesting.
So, and I mean, I'm sure they'll be about the same, but it will be interesting as we're talking about this if we come across any
yeah, I actually did
any clashes there.
Wonder about that because it had a different feel to it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is. Also, the DVDs come with these little extras they filmed around the as just extras for the home release called Club Escaflowne, which is really cute. That they all sat at a bar and Vaughn's voice actor put on a fake mustache and asks them silly questions, and Joji Nakata drew the little tear on his cheek. They're very
Vaughn's
silly.
Voice actor. You mean Seki Tomikazu? That is a name.
I'm sorry. It's early.
But that actually, those sound amazing, and I'm sad that I'm sad I never owned that particular version of Escaflowne because I would happily watch the voice cast of this mess around together. But let's go ahead and get into the meat of the conversation. It's kind of, there's so much happening and it all kind of interweaves that I wasn't 100% sure how to structure this one. So I thought maybe we'd kind of just go character to character and bounce around as needed. So let's check in, I guess, first with our protagonist Hitomi in this stretch of episodes. So how's she doing this week, guys?
She's still good.
Well, she's having a rough time, but she's very good.
Yeah. It is interesting, like because, she has her big crisis of faith, rejecting the call moment, if we're going, not that we should go by Joseph Campbell, he's ancient and overbearing, but, she has to have that moment where she doubts what she's doing and starts to take it seriously. And I found it interesting that I had this moment where, like, if you take the whole these are scary visions thing and replace it with I'm having really vivid hallucinations whenever I do this and it's freaking me out, somehow it made more sense to me as, this would be really overwhelming for a teenager. Like a 15-year-old teenager.
If she has, like, the divination powers and she's, before she, like, told fortunes for her friends, like, ordinary high school kids, then she's not going to see, much that's upsetting, but when she is in a different world in the middle of a war, like, she's gonna see some pretty horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and her powers are getting stronger. The lock-in she had with Zonji, that's his name, right? The Zongi, sorry, the doppelganger. The lock-in she has with him, she dies for, like, a decent chunk of time. And pictures him dying functionally twice and cannot stop it. So yeah, no, I think Hitomi's freak out here is extremely understandable, and there's never a moment with her, because there's some shows where sometimes they'll do stuff like that and it almost just feels like they're trying to inject drama. And one thing I really enjoy about Escaflowne, at least thus far, is despite the sheer amount of nonsense that's happening, and I do have some quibbles with the Duke of Freed because of the about face in that final episode where he's like, "You must always protect this," and he's like, "Actually, never mind." Within about 5 minutes of each other, the main characters, I think the internal logic of who they are propels the story forward really well, and I think so when there's the drama that comes out of that, or calling it drama makes it sound like I'm talking about like, melodrama, and I'm not. I think the way Escaflowne builds in a lot of like soap opera elements, I think it does it like kind of low key, which is to me more fun and entertaining that way.
You mean like Secret Love Child?
God.
Yeah. Oh, we will get to the Secret Love Child. But before we do, my point was, like, I don't feel like Hitomi's like, no, I'm not gonna do this for you guys. Felt like, oh, well, they're just trying to slow down the story. It felt very much like, no, it tracks. This is a thing Hitomi would do in this situation based on, like, the severe amount of trauma she's gone through in the past few days.
It was...
I also like that, sorry, what were you gonna say, Vrai?
Oh, no, I was just... I guess the reason I was thinking about it is I feel like it's so common with female protagonists for people to be like, why don't you just spine up and do this thing? You're the protagonist of a fantasy anime. Clearly, we know you're going to do the thing, so why are you being whiny? And I feel like it's very fair for her to say, no, I don't want to do this. This is upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I like that there's an element of, especially when we talked about the manga last week and how she's really just like a literal object in that, I like that the conversation is kind of framed around, like, she walks in on the guys and they're like, hey, so you're going to do this for us, right? We're going to use your power. And she's like, I'm not your freaking tool. Like, she even says, I don't want to be used as your tool. And I like that there is kind of this pushback of like, I'm not like a sword you can just wield. I'm a person and this is very hard for me. Yeah. And I also really like that ends within the next episode. Vaughn like goes up to her and is like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking about you, and that wasn't cool of me." He's a good boy.
Oh my god, they're so cute. Like in grand fantasy or adventure anime, that have romantic subplots, I so often have difficulty caring about it above the level of like they're okay, I guess. But I really like their Vaughn and Hitomi's dynamic. Like they're so sweet.
Well, it's so like. It is so character driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Dee was saying that like the character drama drives the story, and that's sort of why, like, I think that's why the plot tends to fall out of people's heads, is because it is the stuff with like the international conflict and what's the name of the place? Why am I thinking Zeon?
Zybok.
The Zybok Empire? Yeah.
Not the Zeon Empire, the Zybok Empire. I don't see how I could ever make that mistake. Like all that stuff is pretty not tangential, but it's pretty broadly sketched. Whereas like the character drama is so intricate and it all like interlocks together. It's like not a tangled mess that makes it sound like it's a mess, but it is all like it is deftly woven together. So like of course like your investment is going to be in the characters. It's not like a side note and like in some like big fantasy epic. Sorry. It's not a side note in this big fantasy epic so much as it is the main point, and the epic is just sort of more a vehicle for the character action.
Mm. Whereas I feel like it is...
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it is very opposite in the manga, I think, which is, again, more traditionally shonen, where their relationship is very tangential, feeling like there's a kiss near the end, and it's like, all right, I guess we're back to this now. Anyway, back to the final conflict.
Yeah.
Well, and I really like how we are seeing a relationship develop over the course. Like, at this point, I think maybe they are slightly aware that they might kind of have a crush on each other, but it's not like they're friends.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say just.
Mm-hmm.
They are friends at this point. Like they have developed an organic friendship with each other. based on a lot of mutual aid and like respect for one another, and it's great. And so it's like I feel like I can confidently ship them whether or not they eventually ease into a romance or not. It feels like that's the direction the show is going, but we don't know that for sure. It's like Vrai said, like I think it's easy to get behind it because you do sort of are able to see kind of these shared points and like why they would like each other and want to spend time with each other. And that scene in the woods where they just kind of open up about their childhoods and their siblings was just really sweet.
Yeah.
Oh my god, they're both such good
and
kids.
we need more anime romances to take some pages out of the Von Hitomi book, I would say.
Yeah, because I feel like there are modern versions of this basic dynamic that are basically more extreme and, for lack of a more anime bullshit, because they're more broadly sketched, and those are insufferable. But, like, these two feel so natural, like human people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, I think the fact that the show is in no hurry to make that ship happen is helps it along a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you can do when you have 26 episodes.
Whee!
Well, I mean, there's that, but also we did a Fushigi Yugi watch along last year, and I'm pretty sure they fell in love within like 3 episodes, so it's not necessarily the amount of episodes you have.
Yes, that is true, but, you know, having that longer span of episode makes it so that you have the option of an organic, of an organically growing relationship, as opposed to choosing to make them fall in love after talking to each other twice.
Yeah, I totally agree with. And again, I think the fact that it's character driven, having those 26 episodes allows you to spend more time with everybody. And this show does a really nice job of kind of checking in on people, even if you're not even really getting dialogue from them. Like there was a really nice kind of back and forth where Hitomi's talking to Chid, and the two of them are kind of talking about like basically the power of positive thinking. And we'll get into that later because that's kind of a running theme. Yeah, Hitomi shares the secret with Prince Chid, and we'll talk about that later because I do think that's kind of a running theme in the show that I want to touch base on. But simultaneously, like, Vaughn is practicing archery in the forest and, like, trying to get used to picturing things with his eyes closed. And there's no dialogue there, but it's a really nice touchstone for what he's doing and kind of hammers home what he eventually tells Hitomi when he apologizes to her is that sense of, like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't force somebody else to do this. Like, this is something, if it's that important to me, I should be working harder on it myself. And just little things like that where they'll touch in on characters or like just a few shots of a person. It builds the cast very well.
Yeah, I do feel like the one slight downside is that even though it feels more earned than when this stuff tends to happen, is that the trade-off for Hitomi having this crisis in an understandable way, she's very fainty during this batch of episodes. Like, I
mean, her heart stops. Are you talking about her heart
no,
stopping?
God.
Because I wouldn't call that being fainty.
No, I mean, like, specifically the one where they have the fight with Dilandau, and she's kind of forced to help Vaughn pilot, which on the whole I think is a nice moment of them working together. I think the show salvages it, but it's where it gets the closest thus far to her being like, I thought I could do it, but actually, Vaughn, I need you to do it, and I'll be on the sidelines. Like, I do think it works, but
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to talk about too. Is I do think this arc sidelines Hitomi a little bit, and part of it is, I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Like, she gets kidnapped early on. I think there's a few different attempts from the other characters to kind of objectify her, and the narrative pushes back against that. But I think part of Vaughn sort of coming into his own, I like that plot point because I think there's kind of a running idea, especially in these episodes, about like who can like find the things that are unseen, like the secrets, the hidden things. And Hitomi's adept at it. Millerna, it turns out, is really good at it, and we are definitely going to talk about Millerna in a second here. And we don't really see it from the guys so much. It's almost like kind of a feminine coded characteristic in like the ability to kind of like wait and listen and pay attention to what's going on around you kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Which I think could have leaned really hard into like the different genders are just have these ingrained qualities type thing. And so the fact that Vaughn like takes an interest in it and wants to learn how to do it and is in fact learning how to do it, I think that's a good way to kind of show like traditionally feminine characteristics being an asset and how they're not just something that only the women's can have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like
Absolutely.
That even in shoujo that is like really about making feminine coded qualities powerful and useful, there can still be that divide between the genders type thing. So it is nice to see Vaughn doing that.
Yeah, and the unfortunate side effect of that is that it does kind of end up sidelining Hitomi a bit in this stretch, because she's like, well, you can do it yourself, so I don't need to. So, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on going forward, like, you know, if they find... and certainly Hitomi still does plenty, because she, you know, functionally exposes the doppelganger, because she's able to see past that disguise. And, I mean, she also finds out about the baby daddy, but has respectfully chosen not to say anything. Okay, do we want to talk about Millerna next, since I did just mention her?
Yeah, I think so. I really like it's one of those things that, again, is... This show demands so much sincere engagement. Like, if you start to poke at it even a little bit, it comes apart. It demands, like, this very sincere, like, oh, you're trying, oh, you're doing the thing. Because, like, Millerna secretly being a doctor is so very on one level. Like, you know, she's pink and feminine, but, you know, girls can do stuff too. But also it's like, oh, she wants to have her own personhood and her own goals that she had to put aside. And, I feel for her. And look, she helped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think, you know, like, you seem to be implying, like, it's almost, like, disingenuous that, like, how it's like, oh, she's girly girl, but she's also a doctor. But I thought that was really cool. Because keep in mind, this was, like, the mid-90s, like, so it's not a matter of her rejecting femininity, like, because it would be so, like, I think a equivalent sort of thing that we might see, especially out of YA fantasy, is like she's a princess who wants to be a doctor, and she like refuses to wear fancy dresses, and she hates going to balls, you know, that sort of thing. But showing that she is intelligent and like has, you know, like you said, has personhood and goals outside of trying to be a doctor, shows that I don't think necessarily they're going for a dominant an actual message with it, but you know, she is girly and she is also trying to be a doctor, and you know, I'm not saying like, oh, it's feminist that she is feminine and you know, wants to do a traditionally masculine approach. Like, I'm not going to try to make that argument, because it's a tired argument and it is full of holes. But I didn't really have an issue with it. They both felt like organic parts of her character.
No, yeah, I like it. It's just it reminded... What I was saying is that I think this show often on the surface looks like it's doing dumb things that other shows have done, but it's in the execution that it ends up looking better. Like, I have watched plenty of shows where something like the girly character has a secret masculine skill, and that's cool, and then that's used for one plot point, or isn't used at all. It's just like an informed characteristic. But with Millerna, it makes sense with who she is and her characterization, and it comes in handy in a number of situations throughout this stretch of episodes. Like, it's not just tied to her having a crush on Alan and saving him that one time, and then it kind of floats into the background. So, like, I do think it's well done. I keep having that thought about this show broadly, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I guess. I like Millerna. I like her cute little blouse and leggings combo for when she's when a dress isn't practical.
She has very adorable fashion.
I like how, like, the moment she realized she's going to be spending more time with Hitomi, she's just like, well, we might as well just get along. I might as well not be, like, a total, like, catty bitch to her, and gives her duffel bag back.
Yeah, they pretty much just immediately get along, which I appreciate. Hitomi is very likable, and so are Millerna, and so is Merle, and so the three of them, like, I do enjoy that the show has these kind of, like, underlying ideas about, oh, well, you know, Merle pretty clearly has a crush on Vaughn, and Millerna's obviously into Alan, and Hitomi's kind of, at this point, Hitomi has way more important shit to worry about than romance, so
but
she's
they
not
both
really,
see her as a threat.
Well, they do. I think they do
learn
initially, but then, again, I think the way the series plays it is, it looks like it's going to swerve into that whole, oh, they're going to compete and hate each other, but it just kind of sits in the background, and they all get along pretty well, and Merle and Hitomi have a very fun kind of, playfully combative relationship at this point that I enjoy.
Yeah, I do like that the moment where Merle thinks about, like, spitefully not telling anybody about Hitomi being in trouble lasts half a second. Because normally that kind of thing could go on for an episode or two, and it would just be dire.
Yeah.
And then it turns into the men yelling at her, like, why didn't you do this? Women.
You silly, emotional women.
So Merle has, like, this one tiny moment where she's like, serves her right. And then she's like, no, I gotta help her. And then Millerna, too, when she gets back together, she's like, oh, we're gonna be hanging out. All right, let's be friends. And then they pretty much immediately are. Like, there's not really a lot of, like, sniping or anything like that, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, like, the relationships between women aren't, like, super forefronted in this series, but I do feel like they're not inconsequential either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Again, I think it's a lot of Escaflowne, and there's stuff where if this were an anime airing right now, I'd probably have maybe some deeper criticisms about it here and there. But as a show that was airing in '97 that is very much playing with a lot of the fantasy tropes that were common at the time, I like the way it swerves a lot of those into much, like, healthier and more entertaining directions. And we talked about that last week as well. Like, even with Millerna, I think that she consistently frames her, like, entire driving motivator around how much she loves Alan. But I think the narrative keeps pushing her out of that space. Does that make sense? Like, she herself will be like, I'll give up anything for you because love is the most important thing. And she has some moments like that, where she talks about, like, giving up her job as a ruler functionally, so she can, like, be with him and protect him and all that. She does save his ass several times, so good for her. But at the same time, I think, you know what I'm saying? Like I think in her head, she's like, this is my thing. But then the narrative seems to be like, well, no, that's not your only thing. You're also a doctor. You're a pretty good diplomat, actually. Like, again, you saved Alan's ass, not just with your medical skills, but also with your speechifying skills when she talks to the Duke. And since she kind of has this desire for, like, agency and freedom, and when Alan tries to get her to not do a thing she wants to do, she's still gonna fucking do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that about her as well.
Yeah, when Alan has that, like, dramatic, but I must go moment where he loads her back into the carriage, and then, like, a day later, she's like, sup, I'm here. I'll beat you here.
Yeah, she just, like, immediately leaves. No, he briefly kisses her into paralysis, and then when she, because he's either apparently very, very good or very, very bad. We're not sure which. Once she gets over that, she's like, yeah, I'm not gonna stay behind, so I'll see you guys in Frayed. It's great. And the show does that with, like, everybody that Alan tries to stop from doing the things they want to do, which is kind of a character trait of his. He does it with Vaughn. He does it with Vaughn, too. Like, it's not, like, it's more noticeable with the girls, like with Hitomi last week and then with Millerna this week. But he does it with Vaughn a few times, too, where he's like, no, I'll step in and take care of this. And Vaughn's like, nah, dog, I want to do it. I don't need you to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants to be the hero.
He does, but he's actually just the messiest bitch of everyone.
Yeah,
in all of fiction. And the messier he gets, the more I like him. In my show notes, you guys maybe noticed this. The listeners obviously wouldn't. On my plot point on my note for every character, I have, like, a little thing in parentheses, and for Alan it just says "lol."
He's also the only one who doesn't have any bullet points underneath him.
I have things I want to talk about, but I wanted to, like, leave it open for you guys to say stuff as well.
This is definitely
y'all know that I love Alan, even though he is a bag of trash.
Yeah, this is the trash bag rising period of Alan's character arc, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wants to be the hero. He wants to be the cool guy who comes in and is like, I am here to save the day. And everyone's like, yeah, sorry, we already beat you to it. Or, like, is like, no, shut up, go back. Go back over there.
I find this stretch low-key hilarious with him. Like, I think I joked with you guys that Alan is the comic relief character in the show, and you just don't realize it until you watch it through a second time. Because of kind of what you're talking about of like this sort of, in this stretch of episodes, like, the sort of mystique and, like, nightly romance around him is just, like, gradually peeled away, and you're like, oh, he's making a bad decision. Oh, that's another bad decision.
Every decision is bad.
He gets framed. Most of his decisions are not good ones. And I'm not even, like, here's the thing. I think Well, everything with Millerna is wrong and bad.
What if I just
damn it, Alan.
didn't make a clean break because you kind of remind me of your dead sister who I went the hug for?
He can't stop flirting with girls. He can't stop himself. Like, it's like, oh, there's a pretty girl. Oh, I guess I'm flirting with her now.
I guess I'll have to do some. Well, he's so oops, and we talked about this last week. Like, he's so wrapped up in these ideas of chivalry, which when it sometimes works out for the best, especially in terms of like military matters. Like, again, he's gone to bat for Vaughn a lot, and it's been good. Like, he's helped Vaughn kind of stay alive for large stretches of this series. And that's great. And I think there's a kind of an interesting conversation being had in the series about like, loyalty to, a nation versus to individuals, or, a personal code. Like, do you do what's right, or do you do what the king tells you to do because he's the king and you've sworn loyalty to him? Because Alan gets framed for treason in this episode for the one treason he hasn't committed. He's committed all the other treasons. But I think the show does ask the question, like, was that actually treason? And Millerna fights for him and says, no, he's ultimately trying to help Asteria and everybody by standing against Zybok because my dad's wrong. So from that aspect, I think that some of these moral codes he follows are interesting and like of value. But on the other side of things, he a messy bitch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, you're right.
I just keep saying. I don't use that word very often, but I feel like in this context, it is very important that I use it. And I say it with nothing but affection. You understand.
I feel like your endearment for him is endearing in itself.
Yeah. Like...
I think I'm trying to figure out what it is about him that I enjoy. And again, part of it is, to me, he's kind of a hilarious character. I think that and in some ways I think he's not in the same, so you know how like, okay, apologies to listeners at home who haven't seen Utena, but you know how in Utena, there are like, and I'm going to keep this as vague as I can. There's like these princely figures, and the series is like systematically like stripping away the myth of the prince. I think Escaflowne is doing that a little bit with the knight, with Alan and some of these concepts of chivalry. The difference to me is that in Escaflowne, it's a little bit like wish fulfillment empowerment, because it's like once you realize what's actually going on there, he has no power and he's kind of comical and sad. It's like it's like he keeps trying to sideline everybody, and once everyone realizes, well, no, I'm just not gonna do what you said to do because that's not what I want to do. I think it's like blam, he's gone. He's not even really a factor in this stretch of episode. He gets hurt immediately. Everybody has to do everything for him. Vaughn and Hitomi have to prove his innocence. Millerna has to keep the keep the Duke from, like, I don't know. What did they used to do? Draw them and quarter them and hang them by the neck until dead. I think something to that effect.
Jesus,
all of those steps.
And I think that's kind of great.
You like him the way I like Saionji. This makes sense now.
I would say that Saionji is worse than Alan, though.
Oh, Saionji is terrible, but I feel like he's also a sad, pathetic trash bag, and I kind of feel for him.
That's true.
Yeah, Saionji is 100% worse than Alan because while Alan makes some very poor decisions, I don't think there's anything malicious at the core of anything he does. I think, like Caitlin says, it's like he just doesn't know how to just not
He
flirt.
doesn't have a lot of self-awareness.
No, he does not.
He clearly has, he has this image of himself as the heroic, chivalrous knight. And I think him being promoted to a knight to such a high order of knights at such a young age probably kind of arrested his development almost. Does he have a canon age?
No.
Yes, and it's way too old for comfort. So it's never, I don't think it's ever said within the show, but I looked it up on Wikipedia and I went, oh no, he is 25, according to the Wikipedia.
Sir. So he's 25, he's old enough that he should be figuring his shit out, but he has not figured his shit out.
Yeah, it definitely makes it, good that he's not so non-committal, but also B, weird that he has these two, because Millerna's about the same age as Hitomi, right? So he's got these two...
She's 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These
listen,
very young kids.
No, listen, the romantic parts of it are no good, but that's not what I'm focusing in on here. He became part of the highest order of knights at such a young age. And then he slept with the princess and had a secret love child.
Whoops.
Whoops. That he achieved all of his achievable goals so early that, like, and so I think that sort of robbed him of a lot of his sort of self-awareness, or like his ability to sort of see himself as like, oh no, it's on me that I keep flirting with all the girls. This is my fault.
Yeah, and I think on some level he is aware of it, and certainly in this stretch he's becoming more aware of it, because there are a lot of shots of him just like sadly or thoughtfully like staring at the ground, and I'm like, okay, you might be actually reckoning with some of this now, and maybe the kind of the realization that like you've put on this cloak of chivalry, but like look at all the treasons you've committed.
We talked last time about how this series is kind of poking at and trying to critique masculinity, and it's still doing that here. But one thing I wish it had pushed at a little bit harder is the idea of who is Cheat's father. Is it the man who raised him or the man who gave him his genetic code? And like I feel like it's mostly in the Duke's camp, but sometimes it feels a little bad at Alan, and I'm over here like, no, you've known this child was here and have been not part of his life at all, and I get that you kind of can't, but also, bro, you don't have any claims to this kid.
No, he doesn't, and so far he hasn't attempted to. So I think going forward it'll be interesting to see how the relationship between him and Cheat develops, if it does. Because Cheat is now currently an orphan, so having some parental figures wouldn't be a bad thing. He is like 7? I don't know how old he is. He's not very old though.
Yeah, 6 or 7.
Like
seems like
the fact that he like, gosh, I don't know how old he is because he doesn't act like a child.
Well, no.
He acts like an
it's a
anime
fantasy
child.
series,
But
and
you can sort of see his relationship with the Duke, with his father, the Duke. And yeah, there's definitely
like
a very
his dad.
strong sense of like, listen, some part when the Duke yells at him to stop crying, I didn't love that.
Did not love that.
But,
no.
Yeah,
didn't love that.
I do
but
not
at
care
the
for
same
his
time,
father.
You can see that the Duke has like taken an active interest in raising him and in being his father.
He's 8. Okay, I wikied it. He's 8 according to the Esca wiki, and they have 2 fathers listed on his page, which I appreciate.
Nice.
But yeah, I know. I kind of know what you mean about that. Sorry, circling back a little bit to something you said, Caitlin, about Alan's kind of lack of self-awareness and that sort of just like oozing confidence he had last week, and this week it is gone. Kind of by the end of the stretch of episodes, there is zero confidence to that hot mess of a boy, and I think that kind of ties into some of the ideas at the heart of this stretch of episodes about like kind of when Hitomi's talking, which I mentioned earlier, when Hitomi's talking to Chid and she's like the power of positive thinking kind of thing, like if you say you can't do it, well then yeah, you're not going to be able to, but like that sense of personal confidence actively grants you power, and I think the narrative pushes that with the characters in kind of fun ways. Where the more confident they become, the more active and effective within the story they are. Because, hey, Vrai, is Dilandau okay?
The answer to that, of course, as last week and forever into the future, is no. He is not okay.
No. Dilandau is not okay. However, Dilandau gets shit done because Dilandau is always extremely confident in what Dilandau is doing. like Dilandau has a great deal of effective narrative power because of that confidence, and I think we saw that with Alan last stretch of episodes, and this stretch he has been rendered like completely ineffective. Vaughn's becoming more confident. Hitomi's becoming more confident in her ability to read the future accurately, which is terrifying her. And so I think that interplay between this, and they talk about that with the Atlanteans, like, what did they say, like utilizing personal will as like power or magic or something to that effect. So I think the series is leaning into that idea, and I think you see it within the character arcs, and I think that's really neat. Millerna shows up and is very confident about her doctor skills, and voila, saves the day multiple times. Go Millerna.
Yay. I know you wanted to talk about the Duke's like 5-minute turnaround. On the one hand, it's completely ridiculous. On the other hand, I kind of appreciate it a little bit because it's at least diverting the show away from the really boring old getting too advanced of technology is bad and we should just like old and simple things because advancement is scary. And I like that even though it's completely ridiculously paced. The decision to unlock the key to all that Atlantean history and knowledge is like at least acknowledging that no, human beings are capable of grasping and using knowledge and power responsibly. It's just you need the right people.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Zybok Empire is the right
people. No,
people.
they're not.
Nope.
But that sure is the decision the Duke made. No, but I agree with you, and I think that does kind of tie into this idea that we see with Vaughn and Hitomi here at the end, where it's like, power is scary and can be dangerous, and we're not sure what's going on with Vaughn in that Escaflowne right now. I genuinely don't remember because it's been a while.
Nope. He's had a Shinji moment where he's just kind of souped into his guy mouth.
That was kind of what I was thinking too, yeah.
That's that actually is a scene that what's coming up is a scene I remember actually pretty distinctly because it gets pretty raw, but I won't say how. But yeah, definitely Vaughn figures out this power before he knows how to really use it, or he uses it in a way that Hitomi never really could have considered because it isn't part of her world, and things kind of go sideways with it.
Yeah, and I think it leading in, because I feel like we should touch on Folken and the doppelganger and all of that for a second, but there is a strong sense throughout this episode of the theme of how we construct our identity. Like, Alan doesn't know what to do with himself because he's not the chivalrous knight. He's a traitor who is also not been there, who is not this man's father, somebody else is. And I think he kind of always had that romantic notion that he had this kid in this life he could have had, and any minute he could sweep back in and do that chivalrously, and just never did. I don't know why I get that feeling about him. But there's so much, Hitomi was a normal schoolgirl. Whenever she's really scared, she goes back to that idea of that's who I was, that was my role. And you have the doppelganger character who's like, I don't have a place, I never had an identity of my own, my entire people has no identity. And, which is what draws him to Folken, who's specifically rejected his identity. And I feel like those themes are shaping up very nicely in this stretch.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I like this kind of the doppelganger's backstory is that sort of the sense of not only does he not have an identity, but the identity of his peoples is sort of intricately tied to war, and he doesn't want that anymore. And so Folken shows up and says, "Well, you can change. You can reject that identity and find something else." Now, he does end up murdering people and dying, so not. Didn't really work out the way they said it would, but I think him being drawn to Folken because of that is
right,
is a valuable plot point, kind of about showing how Folken's ideals are appealing to a lot of people who feel similarly trapped in these specific roles or identities that they've been forced into. There's a touch of fantasy racism to it that's not great, but it's I think it's not pushed at hard enough for it to be super distractingly awkward.
Yeah, I mean in general I think Escaflowne has that low-key problem that a lot of anime based on Western fantasy do, in that they're sort of thoughtlessly recreating problematic issues baked into Western fantasy. All of the greedy assessors in Millerna's kingdom have awfully large noses, etc.
Did not process.
Didn't notice that, but that's a fair criticism. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of. I don't think any of us are quite qualified to talk too much about that, but I feel like if if people in the comments wanted to talk a little more about that, it's a thing that just happens in anime fantasy based on Western settings.
Well, and there's also things like the kind of tribal makeup on Zongi, the doppelganger, and we have the backstory with the Atlanteans, and Vaughn's mom being kind of a victim of fantasy racism. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think the series pushes on it hard enough for it to really feel like they're trying to do a metaphor about real world racism, but it's in the background and it's worth noting. Yeah. And again, we're probably not the best people to talk about it, but I did want to at least acknowledge that it is there, and I saw it, and if folks wanted to discuss that in the comments and whatnot, please do, feel free.
Yes, definitely. But I also, it's interesting how the thing with the doppelganger kind of opens up Folken, as I feel like when he talks with Vaughn, he comes across as this very straightforwardly tragic figure, as no, he might be almost an anti-hero, and then this kind of skews more towards, well, his ideas might be good, but he's also very happy to dirty his hands with tactics that may or may not be actually better than the people he's aligned himself with.
Yeah, he's absolutely using, and we talked about this. We touched on this a little bit last week, and I'm sure we'll keep kind of circling back to it. Is he's decided to end, all conflict with like the greatest conflict the world has ever seen. And that sense of, kind of like becoming your enemies in order to beat them, and how that's probably not going to work out. And the pushback of that is on the other side of things, where we have a lot of characters who are more defined by trying to protect and, stop fighting. And, Hitomi desperately wants to keep this doppelganger from dying, even though he's murdered some people and, tried to frame her and her friends for treason. Like, she still doesn't want him to die. And so, we're starting to see that conflict setting itself up in broader strokes, too, I think.
And on the flip side of Folken, Dilandau is still a horrible little murder machine and only getting worse about it. But these episodes I like how the series takes time to humanize and kind of individualize his dragon slayers, his knights, and how much he needs them. Like, they're his family. Yeah, I mean, he does get genuinely upset about Miguel, being murdered by Zongi. Even though Dilandau was punching the dude like the episode prior, he does definitely, you can see that there is a sense of attachment and loyalty there.
No, absolutely. Dilandau has he has selected all of those, like him, young, pretty boys to have with him, who he really does, like, want to see not safe, but like, just, he doesn't like seeing them get hurt, and it's kind of nice, even though he is kind of horrible to them himself.
Oh, he's objectively horrible to them.
He's pretty, honestly, he's pretty abusive to them. Let's not, like,
I was gonna say, dude,
it.
One of his buddies, or one of his underlings, read him a message that was not his own words. It was the words of the Emperor. And when the Emperor said, "Don't get carried away," he slapped the messenger. What an asshole.
He's objectively a terrible little monster.
Yeah, no, I let your fondness for Dilandau let me start getting soft on him. No, he's awful. Sorry, Vrai.
No, I know this.
It's okay. You can be fond of terribles who are of characters who are terrible.
Just like I like Haiji in I like Haiji in Run with the Wind.
And I'm very fond of Alan for reasons that I'm still sort of putting together as we go.
Yeah. This is an exploration for all of us.
Yeah, it's like, here are characters who we know are doing the bad things, but we also kind of like them, because that's how fiction works sometimes, and Escaflowne has good characters.
Yeah, and I think
even when they're being shitty, they're good characters.
Just about all of the antagonists in Escaflowne have a big case of cool motive still murder, which we'll get to in the coming weeks. So yeah,
and we're definitely seeing that with Folken, because after they murder the Duke, I shouldn't say murder, after they're in the middle of a battle and the Duke, walks into a bunch of arrows.
Really stupid.
He walked into that arrow 16 times.
Nice.
Sorry. Folken shows up and is like, "Thank you for stopping the senseless fighting." And it's like, you do remember that you're the ones who started this senseless fighting, right, bro? I really, really like Folken. I feel like I've spent a lot of time talking about my affection for, the female characters, obviously, and then also Alan, even more obviously. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that Folken is my favorite character. Folken is my favorite character. And so...
he's Joji Nakata.
It's Joji Nakata. I find anti-heroes really compelling as characters, and again, his arc of sort of trying to reject this violent society that we talked about this last week, but of trying to reject that and then falling into the trap of it again, I find that I think it's interesting. And so anytime he's on screen, I'm excited to see what he will be up to next.
Yeah,
plus I get that really good background song with the violins, and that's always good too.
Well, one last thing, I guess, as we're sort of wrapping up, is like I want to give my kudos to the fact that Cheed's parentage is so very obvious from basically the word go, but like the actual unveiling of it with the cutaway, like the cuts between Millerna reading the diary and Hitomi telling the fortune is a really well cut together scene, even though it's not a reveal at all.
Oh, the editing in this show is amazing. Like, the editing and storyboarding and everything is absolutely incredible. I love the show's visuals have held up unbelievably well.
Yeah, it's really well put together, and you're right, that scene of the two of them, and I think, I remember watching this as a kid, and listen, I was like 13, 14, I was not super quick on the uptake when it came to, not plot points in general, but, like, stuff involving, like, relationships and things like that, and I remember Prince Chid showing up, and within, like, an episode, my friend and I were like, so he's Alan's kid, right? Like, that's his biological father, right?
Yeah, it's not subtle.
And I think the show I don't think pretends like it's subtle. I think the reveal is really effective, partly because of how well it's cut together, and partly because that's the moment when the characters figure it out. And it's like, oh, okay, so now Hitomi and Millerna, who have been like the people closest to him really, know this. What are they going to do with that knowledge? Because that is potentially very, very bad knowledge. Like, especially if the Duke hadn't known, and the Duke freaking knew.
Yeah. Listen,
everybody knew.
Listen, black hair and brown eyes, like, you're not gonna produce a child with blonde hair and blue eyes like that.
And the kid doesn't. And it's not like the kid looks a lot like Marlene. The kid looks like Alan. The kid looks extremely like Alan. So it is. It was super obvious, and I find that funny every time I watch it. Like the scenes where Hitomi's like, "Oh, I could tell they share a bond," and Millerna makes some comment like, "You guys kind of look alike.
Like you could be brothers."
Yeah, and it's like, and I just imagine Alan, like, on the inside just screaming. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Don't figure it out. It's delightful, is my point. The soap opera wearing a robot suit is very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Gives me feelings.
And I approve.
Mm-hmm.
So... yeah, that, anything else you guys wanted to talk about? We're pretty much at the end of the hour here. I think we covered all the main points I wanted to cover, but I want to make sure I didn't leave anything on the floor.
I think we did all the things I wanted to talk about. Yes.
You know?
It was a busy stretch of episodes, but we got through them. Heck yeah.
I just thought it was very funny that, like, I turned on the first episode for this stretch, and my immediate reaction is like, wait, why is Vaughn in a coliseum? Because I had already forgotten the plot, like, of the first first 6 episodes.
The plot points are incidental to the good characters. And that's okay. So the second stretch of the show I'm very fuzzy on because I've seen the first half a lot and the second half relatively fewer times because, like I said last week, my friends would watch it without me, which was fine. Wow. I'd already seen it, so I didn't mind.
Rude.
No, it was like I'd introduce them to the show and they'd be so into it that I'd be like, well, I can't get together to watch any more of it for another, like, week or something, and they'd be like, well, I don't want to wait, and I'd say, it's fine, go for it. Like, I will not begrudge you your excitement about an anime. So I'm a little bit fuzzy on this next half. I think it's buck wild. So folks at home, like, be ready. I think it, and like this last stretch was busy. I think it gets buck wild in the next like 6 episodes.
I'm pretty sure that the one other big twist that stuck with me is in this next stretch. So that will be exciting to talk about.
Yeah, there will be, I mean, as folks at home have probably noticed with Alan and Marlene's whole backstory and Folken being Vaughn's brother, like this is a show with a lot of reveals in it, and that will continue to be the case, and it'll be fun and sort of retroactively affect like how you look at people, and we'll have a great time. So look forward to that next week.
Yay.
Okay, folks, we'll be taking a break for the next show to do a one-shot, so you'll have plenty of time to watch the next stretch of episodes. We will be doing 7 again. It will be episodes 14 through 20. So look forward to that. Should be lots more to talk about next time we all get together on this one. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Chatty AF. If you like what you heard, we'd love it if you'd tell your friends about it. And if you really like what you heard, we'd really love it if you'd consider tossing $1 or more to our Patreon each month. We recently posted an editorial about how we've got some big plans in terms of doing a site overhaul and making accessibility possible. We really want to get transcripts for these podcasts, and we want to be able to pay someone a fair rate to do that for us. So if those are things you're interested in, again, $1 or more to the Patreon helps. We'll have a campaign up probably when this episode airs as well. So keep an eye on that. Let folks know about it. Again, your support goes a long way towards making Anime Feminist happen, both on this podcast and on the site. If you are interested in more from the team and our contributors, You can check us out at www.animefeminist.com, on Facebook at AnimeFem, on Tumblr at AnimeFeminist, and on Twitter at AnimeFeminist. And that's the show. Thanks for listening, AniFam, and we will catch you next time.